The red on-air bulb ignited, and in that instant, every heartbeat in America seemed to sink to its glow. Muhammad Ali stood alone beneath the furnace-hot studio spots, license revoked, freedom hanging on an appeal no one could predict. Yet his eyes weren't on the cameras, but on the empty boxing gloves laid before him like evidence at a trial. Across the desk, David Frost shuffled a stack of questions sharp enough to draw blood. 3 feet away sat Colonel David Hackworth, rows of Vietnam ribbons catching the light like drawn bayonets. The audience had arrived thirsty for spectacle, some to see a champion humbled, others to watch a war hero silenced. But no one expected the first sound they heard to be silence itself, stretching longer and tighter until even the lighting rig seemed to creak. Ali raised a single finger, not to speak, but to trace an invisible line in the air. Here, it said, is where a fight begins, when no bell will ring and every punch must be thrown with words. The studio air felt colder than the Cincinnati night he had walked through an hour earlier, and Muhammad Ali noticed it the moment the assistant closed the dressing room door behind him. Fluorescent tubes hummed overhead. Under their harsh glow, a metal folding chair waited like an interrogation seat. On the far wall, a black and white television showed the live feed from Stage B. David Frost, immaculate in a charcoal suit, was warming up the audience with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Ali took in every detail: the orderly rows of studio lights, the off-camera boom mics poised like spears, the silent scramble of producers gesturing with clipboards, because a fighter studied the ring before he ever threw a punch. That was lesson 1 in Louisville's Columbia Gym, and it had served him everywhere from Rome to Madison Square Garden. Still, tonight smelled different. Something in the recycled air carried the sour tang of ambush. Half an hour earlier, he'd been laughing with Howard Bingham in the back of a blue Oldsmobile, teasing the photographer about his threadbare scarf, when Gene Kilroy's call crackled through the car phone. "Champ, Frost's people just sent the rundown. Looks like they dug up your Louisville draft board file, clips from Frazier's camp, maybe a few surprises." Kilroy paused. "They want fireworks." Ali had laughed then. "Fireworks? They better bring raincoats, 'cause I'm the storm." But as the minutes ticked toward airtime, the weight of the setup pressed on his shoulders like a damp robe. Frost was no hack writer sniffing for scraps. He was the clever kind, the kind who let a man tie his own noose out of pride and misplaced humor. If the host had gathered every controversial headline from the past turbulent year, his draft refusal appeal still twisting through the courts, Malcolm's ghost whispered in every question, rumors of financial trouble after the New York exile, then tonight might prove rougher than Manila's humidity. Ali loosened his silk tie. No butterflies on this one, just muted navy stripes, and flexed his fingers. The joints still ached from sparring that morning, but the pain grounded him. He remembered the sound of rope skipping under his shoes before dawn, remembered Bondini shouting, "Float, champ! Float, like you got heaven's wind at your back!" Inside the dressing room, the only wind was the buzz of the ventilation fan, and it carried a faint echo of the auditorium beyond. He could almost taste the anticipation in the audience's collective breath. Some wanted blood, others redemption, all of them a story. Ali understood stories. America wrote them on his skin daily. Tonight he would write back. A stage manager, headset askew, poked his head in. 5 minutes, Mr. Ali. Not champ, not greatest, Mr. Ali. A subtle reminder. Here he was, subject, not sovereign. Ali smiled anyway, a gentle tilt of the mouth that masked the switchblade of his attention. When the door closed, he turned the television volume up a notch. Frost was recounting a comedic anecdote about his days at Cambridge, audience laughter rolling like controlled thunder. The host's eyes flicked once to the side where a stack of blue cue cards waited. Ali imagined the words printed there. Lou Alcindor joins nation. Ask influence. Cassius Clay name controversy. Foreman predicts knockout. Each card, another jab. Good. He hadn't come for soft touches. He closed his eyes and drew a breath the way he had before the first Liston fight, slow and deep, filling every corner of the lungs until the diaphragm ached. In that darkness, he revisited the voices that mattered. His mother, Odessa, whispering scripture, Elijah preaching discipline, kids on 23rd Street chanting, Ali Bomaye. They steadied him better than smelling salts. Opening his eyes again, he caught his reflection in the stainless steel mirror. Broad shoulders relaxed, chin level, gaze direct. Not a trace of doubt. Doubt was for men who carried secret shame. He carried only purpose. Another knock. 2 minutes! And the corridor lights outside changed from amber to bright green, signaling commercial break. Ali rose. The chair scraped concrete, a small surgical sound that sliced the hush. He rolled his wrists, let his knuckles crack softly, then patted the breast pocket of his jacket, where a folded letter from Herbert Muhammad rested against his heart. A reminder of court dates, of principles too costly to pawn for public favor. He would not forget. As he stepped into the hallway, the hum of the crowd grew louder. A river approaching flood stage. Cameramen pivoted. The floor director began a 5-finger countdown. Frost adjusted his cufflinks, flashed that photo-ready smile, and gestured to the empty chair opposite his own, as though welcoming a sparring partner into neutral corner. The red tally light atop camera 1 ignited. Ali inhaled once more, felt the familiar surge, part lightning, part lava, and walked toward the ring that wasn't a ring, toward questions sharpened like hooks, toward millions of eyes waiting to see if America's most vocal heavyweight would finally stumble over his own tongue. They didn't know that tongues, like fists, could dance. The applause began before Muhammad Ali's shoes even cleared the curtain. A steady anticipatory rumble that rolled through the tiered seating like distant thunder over the Ohio River. He emerged beneath a crown of spotlights that flattened every line on his finely tailored jacket and cast long shadows across the studio floor. Ali paused in that glow for a single heartbeat, just enough for the cameras to capture the angle that made newspaper editors nod, and then advanced, elbows loose, gait measured, the same rhythm he used on fight night when he sized up a man who still believed footwork was secondary to power. Someone in the third row shouted, "Champ!" in a voice raw with devotion, but Ali didn't turn. If you heard every cheer, you started counting them, and the moment you counted them, you needed more. He settled into the chair opposite David Frost, just as the applause cue light blinked out, leaving behind the fragile hush of live broadcast. Frost leaned forward, fingertips steepled, smile polite, yet predatory. "Muhammad, thank you for joining us this evening. It's been an eventful year for you, to say the least." His accent clipped the syllables like scissors through silk, the genteel voice of Oxbridge somehow sharper than any Bronx broadside. Ali returned the smile, letting a second pass so the lens could drink in every micro-expression. "Every year's eventful when you're the greatest," he replied, pitch warm but edged with mischief. "I didn't ask for quiet, Mr. Frost. I asked for a fair fight." A flicker in Frost's eyes, surprise, maybe irritation, before he pressed on. "Speaking of fights, the Supreme Court is still considering your appeal regarding the draft evasion charge. Viewers around the country wonder, if the decision goes against you, will you surrender your passport to begin that sentence?" The host delivered the words gently, yet each syllable left a bruise. The control room director cut to a tight shot. Ali's face filling the screen, cheekbones sculpted by the light, pupils reflecting cold studio bulbs. He took a breath as deliberate as a man tasting soup before serving it to guests. "David, I already spent 3.5 years in a cell without bars, stripped, banned, called every name in your dictionary, because I wouldn't trade my faith for a rifle. If those 9 justices say guilty after all that, I'll face them with the same quiet I carried into Lewiston when Liston wouldn't answer the bell." A murmur rippled through the audience, part admiration, part uncertainty. Frost lifted a blue cue card with a practiced flourish. "Some say your stand against the war cost you the prime of your career, that perhaps we never saw the fullest blossom of your boxing genius." He let the card dangle. "Do you feel robbed by your own convictions?" Ali chuckled. Not a stage laugh, but the low, rolling thunder Boudini Brown swore could loosen a man's knees more than any hook. "Sonny Liston's glove couldn't rob me. Uncle Sam surely tried." The chuckle faded, replaced by a voice suddenly quiet enough that even the camera crane operator leaned closer. "But convictions are the only jewels they can't pawn, David. They shine when the lights go out. And believe me, I fought plenty of nights with no lights." Frost pivoted quickly, sensing momentum slipping. "Jewels, yes. Yet boxing remains commerce as much as art. Promoter Harold Conrad claims your refusal to sign for a rematch with Joe Frazier is financial cowardice dressed as principle. Care to respond?" Ali's fingers drummed the chair arm once, twice. He knew Harold, knew the price of every syllable the promoter sold to gossip pages. "I'll fight Mr. Frazier tomorrow if Pennsylvania grants me a license. The cowardice isn't mine, brother. It's the pockets that tremble when 2 proud black men split the gate without a white protector counting the change." Gasps. The line cut close to bone, slicing through polite television veneer into the politics broadcasters tried to frame as fringe. Frost straightened, adjusting his cufflink with unnecessary care. "So you believe the resistance to sanctioning your bouts is racially motivated?" "I believe," Ali replied, eyes steady on the host, "that when a man points out a crooked fence, folks blame him for not standing straight." For a moment, the studio felt smaller. The lights seemed hot enough to blister. Frost peeked toward the producer's desk, where a red light flashed, 30 seconds to add break, but he ignored it, determined to reclaim the narrative. "Let's shift slightly," he said, pulling another card. "Earlier this week, Joe Louis suggested that while you possess unmatched agility, your recent bouts showed diminished punching power. He implied that showmanship is masking decline. Your thoughts?" Ali smiled the way a cat might regard a sparrow practicing bravado. "Joe was my hero. If the brown bomber thinks lightning slows as it crosses the sky, he should step outside and look up." Laughter, spontaneous and bright, filled the rafters. Even Frost allowed a thin grin, though his eyes measured the clock again. Ali continued before the host could interject. "You talk of decline, but the only thing declining is America's patience with injustice. When I step into a ring now, I'm the echo of every son whose daddy came home in a flag-draped box. They watch me and think, if a heavyweight can say no, maybe I can too." Frost raised a hand, signaling politely for pause. "Muhammad, many viewers might argue patriotism demands sacrifice." "Sacrifice," Ali cut in softly, "shouldn't be a one-way ticket for the poor while the rich wave goodbye from balconies." The stage manager frantically slashed his hand across his neck. Off air in 5, 4, 3. Frost forced composure. "We'll return after these messages with more from Muhammad Ali, including footage from his training camp you won't want to miss." The tally lights dimmed. Commercial. Instantly, makeup artists scurried forward. An assistant dabbed Frost's forehead, while another fussed at Allie's collar. Frost leaned close, voice low. Compelling answers, but remember, television rewards brevity. Allie's reply was a whisper, meant for two men alone. Truth don't fit into seconds, David. It takes as long as it takes. The break music faded, and the camera lights blazed anew. Frost spoke into the lens. Welcome back. Before we continue, a special presentation. The screen behind them filled with grainy footage. Allie on the heavy bag in Miami, sweat flinging like silver dust. Then slow motion of Fraser's left hook, snapping Allie's head in the garden. The image froze on the moment of impact. A portrait of vulnerability. Gasps fluttered in the crowd. Frost faced his guest. That was perhaps the hardest punch you've taken. Did it force you to confront your own mortality in the ring? Allie studied the frozen frame, the arc of gloved leather kissing his jaw. For a sliver of time, the studio's heartbeat stalled. Then he turned back, voice quiet and resonant. That punch taught me that pain is a photograph. It only lives if you hang it on the wall. I chose to keep moving. He leaned closer, almost conspiratorial. And you know what Joe said when I whispered in his ear afterward? He said, "Champ, I hit you with the kitchen sink and you still standing. What you made of?" I told him, questions. Keep asking 'em, and maybe you find out. Frost exhaled, a soft hiss the microphones barely caught. The crew sensed something intangible shifting, the balance of control recalibrating around the boxer's calm gravity. Lines on teleprompters felt flimsy against lived conviction. Allie adjusted the cuff of his jacket, glanced once more at the frozen image, and smiled as if offering the moment forgiveness. The tape resumed, showing Allie rallying in later rounds, weaving, jabbing, refusing to stay cornered, footage mirroring the conversation now unfolding under studio lights. A producer frantically signaled 90 seconds left in the segment. Frost shuffled his cards, eyes flickering for an angle that could still draw blood. Ali sat patient, hands steepled like a man prepared to pray or pounce, depending on the bell. The air bristled with unsaid things, about war, about race, about the price a black champion paid for speaking truth in 1970. And as the seconds drained, the studio audience understood something Frost had not anticipated. They weren't watching a verbal sparring match. They were witnessing a man refuse a narrative he didn't author. The host cleared his throat, found one final question, and raised his gaze. But the floor director's countdown arrived first. Segment over. Theme music swelled. Allie remained poised, a statue carved from anticipation and poise, waiting for whatever round came next, knowing the fight was only beginning to warm. The red on-air sign glowed again, but the room had cooled in the brief darkness, as though every bulb had drawn a long breath with the audience. Allie sat motionless, while a makeup girl dabbed powder along the ridge of his cheekbone. He thanked her with a wink that broke the rules of distance between star and crew, then rolled his shoulders the way a man might settle into a hammock he'd strung himself. Frost lifted his next blue card, yet seemed reluctant to look at it. The producers, sensing drift, decided on escalation. A side curtain rippled and outstepped Lieutenant Colonel John Hawk Patterson, Vietnam combat veteran, silver star pinned to dress greens that caught the light like a razor. A second camera swung to capture the tableau, war hero versus draft resistor, and the collective pulse in the gallery kicked up as if someone had fired a starting pistol. Patterson saluted the host, ignored Allie, and took the spare chair angled like a judge's bench. Frost managed a thin smile. "Colonel, thank you for joining us at short notice." The soldier's jaw flexed. "Happy to serve, sir." He turned finally toward the heavyweight. "And to speak with Mr. Clay." The deliberate use of Ali's former name cracked through the hush, brittle as ice under skates. Ali's eyes narrowed a fraction. He'd endured that small violence many times, but the sting never dulled. He folded his hands, thumbs brushing together in a slow, deliberate rhythm a trainer would recognize as pre-fight cadence. Frost wasted no time. Colonel Patterson flew 41 missions over Quezon. He believes refusal to serve dishonors the men who didn't make it home. "Colonel?" Patterson leaned forward, voice gravel thick with command. "Boys your age are bleeding in rice paddies while you sit on talk show sofas quoting the Quran. You call that conscience? I call it cowardice." He spat the final word like a mouthguard onto dirty canvas. A few audience members gasped. Others leaned in, hungry for recoil. Ali didn't blink. The pause stretched, silk pulled taut. When he finally spoke, the tone was gentle, almost paternal. "Colonel, I respect your service the way I respect any man who risks his breath for what he believes. But courage is no uniform. If I strap on your ribbons without believing in your war, that would be the real cowardice." The colonel's nostrils flared. "You're living free because men like me stand a wall." Ali nodded. "And you're living free because men like me remind the wall why it was built. Freedom without conscience is a jail with glass doors." Frost sensed ratings gold. "Colonel, your rebuttal?" Patterson reached into his pocket, produced a dog tag attached to a broken chain. "Private First Class Samuel Ortiz," he said, holding the medal toward the camera. "Killed while you were touring college campuses." His knuckles whitened around the tag. "He never got a talk show chair." Ali stared at the sliver of metal as if reading scripture. His voice lowered. "Neither did Emmett Till, Colonel, and he never fought in any jungle. Death ignores geography." He drew a slow breath. "Give me that tag." Patterson hesitated, confused, then placed it in the boxer's palm. Ali closed his fist gently, bowed his head for a second that felt like a funeral march in miniature, then set the tag on the table between them. "Let it rest here, so every question remembers it has a weight." The colonel opened his mouth to reply, but Frost cut in, half to salvage tempo, half to contain a spark he feared might ignite. "Muhammad, let's address something practical. Senator John Stennis claims your public stance is fueling draft resistance among Negro youth nationwide. He cites letters from Mississippi parents who blame you for their sons facing jail." Ali's eyes lifted to the lighting grid, perhaps picturing constellations beyond it. "Senator Stennis wants someone to blame because the mirror's crowded, David. If a poor black boy refuses to die in Saigon, maybe he first learned how cheaply America priced his life in Jackson or Selma." He looked into camera one, voice quiet enough that viewers would lean toward their sets. "Brothers, if your heart tells you war is wrong, don't let fear sell it for a uniform. Truth is the only draft that never ends." Backstage, network legal counsel scribbled frantic notes. The sponsor representative for Lucky Strike cigarettes mouthed an expletive. Viewers at home, however, were phoning the switchboard so feverishly the operator dropped her pencil. In Alabama, a mother of 4 who'd lost her eldest at Hugh felt fury rise. Then, unexpectedly, tears, because the boxer's tone reminded her of the pastor who'd comforted her at the funeral. In Detroit, 3 college students gathered around a black-and-white zenith, pumped fists, because someone finally spoke their doubts on national television. Frost checked the clock. 6 minutes left before national news cut in. He squared his shoulders. "Colonel Patterson, last word." The soldier inhaled, chest plate rising. History will judge you, Mr. Clay, and it won't be kind. Allie's answer came soft as dusk. History judges all of us, Colonel, but it listens hardest to the ones who kept talking when it was dangerous. He offered a half-smile that held no malice. Besides, the name is Ali. It means Most High. I aim to live up to it. The camera zoomed tight on the boxer's face. A bead of sweat traced his temple, caught the light, and for an instant resembled a tear. But only the sharpest eyes noticed, and none could say whether it came from heat or heart. The stage manager's hand sliced the air. 30 seconds. Frost, sensing narrative slipping beyond control, tried to rap. We'll have closing thoughts after the break. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. As the lights dimmed once more, Allie extended his hand across the gulf to Patterson. The colonel hesitated, then clasped it. The grip was firm, respectful, undeniably human. And in that fleeting tableau, boxer and soldier, opponents by principle yet bound by something older than flags, the audience glimpsed a lesson no rating sheet could quantify. The handshake lingered exactly long enough for every flashbulb to explode. Then the darkness swallowed the stage, and with it the certainty of who had won the round. The commercial block sputtered across a dozen living room screens. Razor ads, butter jingles, a Pontiac Crest sprinting through Midwest cornfields. Yet nobody in the control room could hear it over the argument trembling at the edge of a shout. David Frost's producer, Milton Klein, waved a clipboard like a pistol. They sent a Vietnam hero to tangle with Ali, and he came out looking like a school principal. He jabbed the air toward the darkened stage. We still have 22 minutes of airtime. We need blood, or we lose Omaha and Tulsa. An intern slid past them, headset askew, whispering that switchboard lines 3 through 7 had collapsed beneath calls. 2 parts outrage, 3 parts hallelujah. Klein cursed softly. Ratings gold, but sponsor cyanide. Behind the scenery, Allie leaned against a prop brick wall, towel-draped royal mantle style across his shoulders. Howard Bingham, camera slung from his neck, snapped a frame, Allie's profile half swallowed by shadow, the curve of his nose echoing the Roman coins Bingham collected. Champ, he murmured. Chicago Tribune just telexed for comment. Allie cocked an eyebrow. Tell 'em the truth fits on postage. He glanced toward the glowing doorway where crew bustled. You see Patterson's hand? Shaking like a leaf. But the man held on anyway. That's courage, too. Bingham nodded, thinking that history would one day need exactly that sentence. A stagehand, freckles, crew-cut, still smelling of Brill cream, approached, holding a folded telegram like he'd discovered contraband. Mr. Ali, sir, Western Union from Louisville. Ali unfolded it. His younger brother, Rahman, had scrawled in block letters. Mama says, speak from the heart, not the jaw. People hear the heart longer. Ali smiled. Tell Mama I'm listening. The boy, dazzled, ran off clutching imaginary air. Meanwhile, in a smoky NBC office 3 floors up, an FBI liaison named Wardell flipped through minutes of the show. He dialed a White House extension, cleared his throat as Haldeman came on. Sir, the Clay broadcast is turning. Crackle on the line, then, monitor. Observe. The call clicked dead. Wardell exhaled. Scrutiny had become his full-time weather. Back under the Klieg's, Frost dabbed his forehead with a square of linen, the starch gone limp with sweat. A runner handed him a new blue card. He read the scribble. Question his faith, then tax lines. End on patriotism. He grimaced. Somewhere in him a BBC-bred conscience kicked, but the network appetite snarled louder. When the applause sign flashed, he straightened and offered his most diplomatic grin. Ali strode out again, towel gone, suit jacket buttoned, every step unhurried, a man measuring tempo for a title round that never ends. The audience's clapping rose not in thunder, but in an enveloping hush, that odd, reverent percussion reserved for church bells and farewell trains. Frost began, voice silk-thin. "Muhammad, earlier you cited conscience. Some critics say your Islamic faith is merely shield and slogan. Would you still refuse if you'd been born, say, Presbyterian?" Ali's laugh rolled warm, surprising. "David, conscience ain't stitched to a Bible cover or a Quran spine. It's what a man hears when the crowd leaves and the mirror gets honest." He leaned in, conversational yet colossal. "I found mine in Islam, but every man's got a well if he digs deep." Klein signaled from the wings. Pressure up, cut polite talk. Frost followed. "Taxes, then. Government lawyers claim you owe interest on unpaid fight purses. How does a moral stand square with owing the country money?" Ali's smile cooled, but held. "The government froze my license, my earnings, my passport, then asked why the cupboard's bare. That's like drowning a man and billing him for water." Laughter burst, unscripted, from the top rows. Even camera 2 shook a hair off axis. In row 3, Colonel Patterson remained, jacket folded over one arm. He studied the boxer with a mixture of residual anger and dawning, unwelcome respect. When Ali's gaze drifted his way, the colonel gave the slightest nod. Ali returned it so subtly a viewer might think it camera glitch. Yet between the military man and the objector, a filament of understanding sparked, the kind forged only when each recognizes conviction in the other, however opposed. Frost rallied. "Suppose the Supreme Court upholds your conviction. 5 years in prison. Would you still say no to the draft?" Silence fell crystalline. Ali clasped his hands, knuckles pale, but his voice emerged steady as tide. "If the court locks me away, it locks up a body, not a principle. And when a principle's true, it slips between bars and whispers through keyholes until even the jailer's children start humming it." The gallery erupted, not frenzy, something steadier, like the low roar of an incoming sea. Klein slammed a fist into his clipboard. Sponsors would flee or double, impossible to predict. Wardell upstairs wrote one terse line: "Public support accelerating." Ali sat back, unhurried, the studio lights gilding sweat across his brow like a boxer's crown. Frost shuffled cards, out of ammunition, yet bound to keep firing. Off camera, a red light blinked. 10 minutes to the next break. Eternity and heartbeat, both. And as the host opened his mouth, Ali turned his head slightly, hearing perhaps the echo of his mother's telegram or the distant cheer of a South Side gym, and prepared to slip the next punch before it was even thrown. The studio clock stuttered toward 8:30, and the chilled air that poured through the ceiling vents felt suddenly thick, like the hush before humid Midwestern rain. Somewhere backstage, a kettle drum from the house band rumbled a tuning roll, and Ali caught the vibration in his sternum the way a fighter feels the canvas quiver under an opponent's footwork 2 corners away. He rolled his shoulders once, twice, letting the jacket hang loose so no one would read tension in the fabric. Across the set, David Frost leafed through a final blue card, but the edges trembled, betraying nerves beneath his polished Oxford demeanor. The technicians, instinctively drawn to drama, watched them both with split loyalties, to the broadcast that paid their rent, and to the boxer who seemed to siphon wattage straight from the stage lamps. Back in the control room, Milton Klein barked orders that collided mid-air. Camera 2, long lens, stay tight on Ali's face. Camera 1, drift toward Frost when he pivots. Don't telegraph it. A junior switcher wearing giant headphones mouthed, "Yes, sir," but kept glancing at the AP ticker spitting out State House numbers nobody cared about tonight. Above their heads, a red on-air bulb flared again, and the producer crossed himself, though he'd sworn off his mother's faith in '59. Frost began with a tempered cordiality that fooled nobody. "Muhammad, the nation has watched you decline conscription, decline lucrative bouts, even decline polite silence. Some would say you've traded glory for stubbornness. Do you ever lie awake fearing you gambled wrong?" The question floated like a jab measuring distance rather than seeking damage. Ali smiled, just a crease at one corner, then answered with slow, river-deep cadence. "Brother, I ain't lost a night's sleep since I was 12 and heard a Louisville cop say a Negro kid couldn't fill the gardens. Back then, I promised myself I'd fill rooms far bigger than his imagination. Tonight looks like one of 'em rooms to me." Applause gusted through the crowd. Frost pressed on, voice tightening. "This isn't Louisville. It's national policy. Young men from Bangor to Bakersfield stand in mud and monsoon, while you sit here defended by lawyers." He said it softly, which made the blade keener. Ali leaned forward until his cufflinks caught the light. "Those boys in the jungle are sons like me. I wish 'em home safe, but nobody can hand me a rifle and tell me my conscience got canceled because the calendar says so." He tapped 2 fingers to his chest. "Conscience got no draft board." Colonel Patterson, invited back to a front-row seat as symbolic counterweight, shifted uneasily. Hours ago he had derided Ali over coffee in the green room. Now he found himself writing phrases in a pocket notebook. Not rhetoric, conviction. Almost against his will. The audience sensed the colonel's discomfort and began stealing glances at his rigid posture, wondering if his spine or his beliefs held him straighter. Upstairs, Wardell took another call, this time from a Senate aide who spoke in code thin as tissue. Could the network perhaps schedule a returning Medal of Honor recipient to rebut Ali next week? "Optics," the aide insisted. Wardell answered noncommittally, his eyes fixed on the boxer's features enlarged across 16 monitors, reading them like seismic graphs for tremors of treason that simply weren't there. On stage, Frost tried a flank attack. "Let's pivot to your finances. Reports say you've donated sizable sums to mosque charities while ignoring municipal tax appeals in Louisville. Patriotic obligation includes paying for roads, schools, the very freedoms you cite." Ali gave an almost imperceptible nod, acknowledging the seriousness. "I pay what I owe when they let me earn it. Until then, I tithe to the people who fed me when I was hungry in spirit. A freedom that can be bought with unpaid taxes is cheaper than the paper receipts." The boom mic operator, Vietnam vet, Purple Heart, felt something loosen in his chest. A resentment he hadn't named until it slipped away amid those words. He adjusted gain levels so travel-weary viewers in motel rooms could hear every softened consonant. Frost exhaled, sensing momentum slipping beyond reach. "Is there anything, Muhammad, absolutely anything, that could make you reconsider your stance? Say tomorrow Congress ends the war. Would you salute the flag the way you used to before Cleveland '66? Ali's eyelids lowered half a beat. Then he answered so quietly the studio leaned in. "The flag's cloth never offended me. It's the wind behind it that chooses whether to shade or to smother. Change the wind, brother, and watch me wave Old Glory till my shoulders ache." The silence afterward wasn't absence of sound. It was presence of thought. Even Klein paused mid-gesture, clipboard sagging. Somewhere a single spectator began clapping. Soon the applause spread, measured but unstoppable, like rain tapping tin rooftops in widening circles. When the break cue finally flashed, Frost slumped, perspiration pasting a rogue curl to his temple, and Ali reclined, rolling his neck as though the last 5 minutes had merely warmed him up. In the wings, a British correspondent whispered to her cameraman, "He's not just winning an interview, he's rewriting how a nation hears itself." And the cameraman, older, war-scarred, whispered back, "Aye, and Frost is punching smoke." The house lights dimmed for commercials no one would remember. But in living rooms across America, the earlier sentences still reverberated, chasing fathers into quiet reflection and sons into unexpected pride. Ali sipped water, eyes closed, already mapping the next exchange like rounds 7 through 9 of a title defense. Knowing the hardest punches often land after the crowd thinks the scorecards are settled. The applause sign winked off, and the commercial jingle dissolved, leaving the studio in an uneasy half-light. Stagehands scurried to wheel out a second leather chair. No one had warned Ali, but he read the move the instant he saw it, and straightened, hands draped loosely over his knees. Frost returned from the wings, wearing the crisp smile gamblers adopt when their chips are low, but the dice are still warm. "For our next segment," he announced, "we're joined by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Chuck McGee, recently home from Cam Bay." The colonel strode in, square-jawed, ribbons flashing like tin embers under the spots. Some audience members rose in reflexive respect. Others, wary of ambush theater, stayed seated. Ali simply inclined his head, acknowledgement without surrender. Cameramen split the frame, the decorated officer on one side, the suspended heavyweight champion on the other. American icons cast as opposing articles of faith. Frost's voice softened into a preacher's hush. "Colonel, you've watched Mr. Ali refuse induction. You've seen young men fall for that same right. What would you ask him?" McGee's stare was steady, but not hostile. "Sir," he began, addressing Ali directly, "my question is simple. While my boys and I crawled paddies, your words traveled further than our supply lines. Did you ever fear they'd cost American lives?" The studio chilled. Even the floor manager's pen stopped mid-checkmark. Ali folded his hands, not fists, and studied the colonel's weather-creased face. "I feared my silence might cost more," he said. "If a man walks a road he knows is wrong and says nothing, the quiet kills him first, and others after." He paused, letting the sentence breathe. "But I honor the courage you carried, Colonel. Your fight just ain't my fight." McGee considered that, the tendons in his neck easing. He'd rehearsed indignation, yet the boxer's frankness disarmed him as surely as a clip-on mic. "Courage," he replied, "sometimes means obeying orders you doubt." Ali nodded, "And sometimes it means refusing orders you know." The two men, one in khaki, one in midnight suit, sat there as though the decades of different soil between Louisville and Laos had narrowed to a single plank bridge neither wished to burn. Frost sensed control slipping again, and lunged. "Muhammad, is there any conflict where you would take up arms?" Ali inhaled, memories flickering. Cassius in Rome, cheering Vincent's basketball. Olympic podium in Rome 60, when he still thought medals insulated boys from bombs. Malcolm at Hampton House saying faith could not be portioned like army rations. If the battle came to my doorstep, threatened my daughters, my people, I would stand. But I will not ship my conscience overseas in a crate and hope it's waiting when I get back. Up in the control booth, Klein whispered, "God, that's good TV." before correcting himself. News! I mean news. But no one heard. Their eyes were glued to the feed. Ratings meters in Chicago, Denver, Jacksonville spiked hard enough to register like tremors at headquarters. Frost tried humor as tourniquet. "You've always been known for poetry. Float like a butterfly. Sting like a bee. Does defiance rhyme so easily?" Allie grinned, teeth bright beneath the Klieg glare. "Son, rhyme ain't easy. It's earned. It's the music hard times make when a man refuses to dance to someone else's tune." Laughter rolled across the seats. Not at Frost, not yet. But the timber was shifting. Charm was abandoning the host for the guest. A cue card runner flashed a desperate sign. 5 minutes. Frost skipped ahead. "Let's talk money. You've lost purses no soldier will see in a lifetime. Any regrets?" Allie's eyelids lowered like theater curtains about to rise on a finale. "Regret is cheaper than principle," he said. "I spend what I have, and I keep what I am." The colonel's hand moved, tiny, involuntary, toward Ali, as though to shake it, but protocol kept his arm upon the chair's ridge. The gesture nonetheless caught on camera, and living-room spectators across the country murmured at the unlikely semaphore of respect. Somewhere beneath the hardwood stage, cables hummed and dust motes swirled in projector heat, unaware they were witnessing broadcast alchemy. Hostility turning to hesitation, hesitation to reluctant regard. Ali adjusted his tie knot, deep crimson, same shade the Courier-Journal once used in a headline dubbing him the Louisville Lip, and asked Frost, almost gently, "Any more surprises, David?" Frost opened his mouth, then shut it when no line came. The floor clock hit 49 minutes. Klein called for closing graphics, but he already knew the lead. Champion outpoints panel with words, not gloves. Down on set, Ali stood, buttoned his jacket, and extended a hand to Colonel McGee first. Cameras drank the handshake like bourbon poured slow, an image destined for morning editions. Even kids folding papers before dawn would feel in their spine without yet knowing why. The colonel nodded once, an almost imperceptible concession. Yet the studio felt the shift. Frost sensed ratings gold and pressed the advantage, swiveling toward the crowd as if they were jurors, and he, the glib attorney, determined to wring an admission. "So, Muhammad, if your silence would have killed, what do you call 2 years of boxing silence? No title defenses, no pay-per-views, just the echo of what might have been." The question was jagged on purpose. Ali let it hang. Camera lenses searched his face for the famous flash of wordplay, that floating poetry he used to drop fighters long before the bell. But the moment birthed something slower, heavier, like a bass drum replaced the snare. "When the bell doesn't ring," he replied, "you hear other sounds. Your heartbeat, your mama's prayer across state lines. 1,000 boys in rice fields who never heard of Louisville but know the taste of dust just the same. I lost more than a belt these 2 years, Mr. Frost. I lost a rhythm and found a reason." There was no rhymed couplet to cushion the line, only marrow-level certainty that pushed through the boom microphones and into the control room where a junior editor forgot to breathe. Frost's cue cards fluttered. The colonel cleared his throat, then surprised even himself. "Champ, I buried men who enlisted because they believed America never quits. Hearing you tonight, I realize they weren't the only ones fighting. You fought the silence." The revelation cracked open a seam in the audience. Applause from places in the balcony Frost's staff had assumed were stony ground. A red light blinked atop camera 3. "Stand by for break." But Frost chopped the signal with a palm, a desperate quarterback waving off a blitz. "We stay with this," he barked, hot enough that the producer's headset hissed. He pivoted toward the wings where another prop waited. A trophy case display of Ali's confiscated championship belts, borrowed from the State Athletic Commission for Maximum Theater. Stagehands pushed the glass case forward, velvet backdrop glowing under spotlights. Gasps trickled through the rows. Frost spoke to the audience, yet aimed the dagger at Ali. These, he gestured, were symbols of greatness. Viewers at home wonder whether a symbol means anything if the man behind it walks away. Ali rose, slow as sunrise. The chair gave a soft creak, and the entire room leaned forward, unsure he would stop at the plexiglass or smash through. He approached the case, the colonel unconsciously mirroring his movement in a half-step of protection. Ali's reflection met him. Broad shoulders framed by studio light, eyes that once gouged opponents with their certainty, now reading his own silhouette like scripture. He placed a palm on the glass. "A symbol," he murmured, almost to himself, "is a mirror until you give it meaning. Without a man's word, it's tin and leather." He turned, voice climbing enough to fill the scaffolding. "I did not walk away from greatness. I walked toward something larger than it." A woman in the third row, a widow wearing the blue star pin that signified a son still deployed, rose and spoke without waiting for permission. "If my boy comes home, it'll be because all of us, on every side, learned to see larger." Her words trembled but did not break. Ali nodded toward her as though tagging in a partner. "Sister, your courage weighs more than those belts ever did." Frost opened his mouth, but language failed him. The script had dissolved. Instead, he gestured to the bandleader for an impromptu musical bridge, anything to reset the pulse. The brass section struck a tentative chord reminiscent of New Orleans funerals, half lament, half celebration, while Ali and the colonel stood shoulder to shoulder before the glass case, two soldiers of different wars measuring the same cost. The studio audience, no longer spectators, began to hum along, their voices catching in pockets of harmony born less of tune than of shared oxygen. The floor manager's countdown fingers danced, warning of dead air, yet no one on stage moved to end the moment. The network would eat the overtime fee. Something unplanned yet irrevocable was underway. Ali finally stepped back, leaving a single print on the glass, visible even beneath the Klieg lights. Frost swallowed, found a shard of his professional baritone, and managed, "We'll continue after this." But everyone present knew that whatever came next, the conversation had already shifted from television spectacle to living archive. Lights faded to commercial, and instantly the set became a battlefield without cameras. Boom arms swung aside, floor staff sprinted, and the talkback line in Frost's ear cracked with the urgency of men worried about sponsors. At the edge of the stage, Fred Silverman, the ambitious young programming chief ABC, had poached from CBS, whispered like a drill sergeant who'd misplaced his battalion. "David, we're bleeding minutes. Chevron's buying the next break. They don't pay for elegies. Push him." Frost wiped sweat from his upper lip, nodding while his pulse thumped louder than the studio orchestra. Behind them, Colonel David Hackworth, twice wounded in Vietnam, ribbons like confetti on his dress jacket, stood rapt before the belt display, fingertips grazing the print Ali had left on the glass as though it were holy oil. Ali sat in a spare director's chair, away from the glare, a towel draped over his shoulders. Bundini Brown materialized with a paper cup of water. "Champ, they gon' swing low this round, you hear? Keep your chin tucked." Ali chuckled, voice low. "Bundini, if words were hooks, I'd be on a stretcher already. Let 'em come." Across the floor, Geraldine Jones, a makeup artist borrowed from Nightline, dabbed translucent powder onto the colonel's brow. He didn't notice. His distant stare suggested jungles half a world away, where symbols meant little, and silence meant survival. The red bulb atop camera 3 flashed again. 15 seconds. Frost hurried back to center stage, cards reordered, new gambit loaded. Silverman gave him the thumb up that always felt like a knife point. The band cut mid-chord, and the applause sign flickered. Live once more. Frost's smile returned, but its edges frayed. During the interval, ladies and gentlemen, we received a wire from the United States Supreme Court clerk. He held up a pale blue telegram. Next month, they'll rule on Mr. Ali's draft evasion appeal. Some say the court should consider how his refusal has affected the morale of men like Colonel Hackworth. Frost pivoted, inviting the colonel beneath the hotter spotlight. Colonel, you've commanded soldiers who bled for this flag. Given the chance, what would you ask Muhammad Ali tonight? Hackworth straightened, medals catching white light in staccato flashes. His jaw worked once before sound emerged. I'd ask whether he understands what it costs a kid from Ohio to watch his buddy die and still believe the country loves him back. The audience stilled. No shuffles, no coughs, just the immense quiet of 1970, America holding its breath. Ali rose slowly, towel sliding from his shoulders like a cornice of snow. He stepped toward the colonel until ribbons and robe nearly touched. Colonel Hackworth, I do know cost. I know the price of stepping into a ring where every punch can snatch the light from your eyes. But I also know the cost of stepping out, giving up a title, a livelihood, 3 prime years, because conscience rang louder than the bell. Your uniform says sacrifice, so does my absence from that belt. Hackworth's eyes glimmered. Sacrifice is bleeding beside your men, champ. Ali nodded once. Bleeding or believing, both leave a stain. He turned to Frost. That telegram you wave like a pistol. Whatever the 9 justices decide, will judge my legality, not my humanity. That verdict already lives in here. He tapped his sternum with 2 knuckles, the same rhythm he once used to set up a jab. Frost hurried to reclaim tempo. Yet, Muhammad, critics say your stance emboldens draft dodgers while demoralizing troops. Isn't that selfish? Ali's reply came measured, each syllable a brick. Selfishness is asking a man to die nameless, so another man can remain comfortable. I refuse a war, not a warrior. I honor the soldier, but question the order. Somewhere in the mezzanine, a lone Marine in dress blues, Sergeant Ron Kovich, home on leave, rose on crutches and saluted both men. The gesture ricocheted through the house. Pockets of applause erupted, collided, fused into a roar Frost could not ride. He shuffled his cards again, dry leaves in a windstorm, and signaled the band for music that would not come. The conductor folded his arms. Even trumpets understood historic cadence when they heard it. Silverman hissed into the headset, "Get control, David, or we cut the feed." But the feed now belonged to a current stronger than corporate fear. Ali faced the camera, gaze steady. America, I am still your son. You can punish me, praise me, strip me of gold, but you cannot unteach me my own heart. And if loving that heart makes me unpatriotic, then your dictionary is too small. Hackworth exhaled, the breath whistling through teeth clenched during 2 tours. He extended a hand. Ali took it. 2 grips forged on opposite sides of the debate met in the nation's living rooms, and for a beat the country saw itself not in conflict, but in dialogue. The studio clock ticked far beyond the scheduled segment. Ratings analytics would later show viewers stayed. Wives delayed dinners, bartenders muted jukeboxes, Greyhound drivers eased off throttles to hear the hum of something larger than newsprint slogans. Frost pale now, glanced off stage at Silverman, and read the sign language of executives, terrified yet thrilled. "Let it run." He cleared his throat. "We, appear to be witnessing a conversation. The court of public opinion will deliberate long after tonight. We'll continue, right after this." The red bulb went dark, but no one moved. Even the machinery needed a moment to absorb the handshake that had recalibrated an entire broadcast. When the cameras snapped back to life, the air felt newly thinned, as though every cubic inch of Studio One had already been inhaled once and stripped of its oxygen. No jazzy sting welcomed viewers. Instead, an audible hush carried over the speakers into living rooms from Anchorage to Atlanta, the hush of an audience that realized it might be present at an unrepeatable moment. Frost tried for levity. "We returned to a conversation both spirited and unexpectedly civil." But his voice betrayed the tremor of a man who recognizes history tightening its lens around him rather than the guest. Allie was still on his feet. He had not released Hackworth's hand during the break. They had simply lowered their arms like comrades at a battlefield truce, fingers interlaced, sharing the invisible weight of divergent convictions. The colonel spoke first, softer than before. "Champ, I've lost friends over there. Good men, boys, really. But I shook your hand because I saw in your eyes you'd walk into a different kind of fire for what you believe." Ali's response was equally measured, "And I squeezed your hand because I felt the calluses of somebody who already has." Frost pivoted, sensing the ratings alchemy of mutual respect. "Colonel Muhammad, could the nation learn something from the two of you tonight?" Hackworth nodded. "Courage isn't a single currency. His denomination and mine may spend in different stores, but it's minted from the same metal." Ali smiled, the famous gap between his front teeth catching the light. "And it buys the same thing in the end, peace of mind, if you can afford it." A muffled beep sounded off stage, the floor manager's headset relaying a bulletin. Frost received the scribbled note, brows climbing. "We have confirmation that the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on your case this June, Muhammad. Your reaction?" Ali inhaled, slow, diaphragmatic, like a fighter about to take the opening bell. "Reaction? I already argued my case in the silence of exile. Now, 9 robes get their turn. Whatever they decide won't change what's already tattooed on my soul." Someone in the balcony shouted, "We're with you, champ!" Then another voice, older, gruffer, answered, "God bless our troops!" A ripple of murmurs threatened to swell into discord. Ali raised one glove-sized hand, palm outward. "Hold on, brothers. This ain't a split decision night. We all walk out the same door when the show's over." Frost seized the lull. "Muhammad, your critics say boxing needs you more than you need it. That the sport is adrift without its brightest star. That young fighters mimic your shuffle in empty gyms, hoping lightning strikes twice. Do you plan to return if the court rules in your favor?" Ali tilted his head, considering the ceiling rigging as though it were the night sky above Louisville. A river doesn't unlearn its course just because a dam says stop. Remove the barrier. The water remembers where it was going. Bundini's voice drifted from the wings, half whisper, half chant. "Float, butterfly. Float till they beg you to sting." The audience laughed, tension vented. Even Frost allowed a grin. He checked the studio clock, minutes overdue again, but neither network brass nor sponsor could amputate what the public was now devouring in real time. The conversion of confrontation into communion. A junior runner appeared with a fresh telegram, hand trembling. Frost opened it live, breath catching. From Justice Thurgood Marshall. He is recused from deliberations as a former Solicitor General. Yet he sends this personal note. "True equality demands the courage to dissent as surely as the bravery to serve. Hackworth blinked hard, the soldier's armor cracking just enough to reveal gratitude. Allie touched the colonel's shoulder. "That, right there, that's the referee calling for a clean fight." Silverman motioned wildly to cut, but Frost ignored him and stepped aside, ceding center stage. Allie faced the main camera one final time. "America, the bell don't signal the end tonight. It signals the start of a longer round. Some will step forward, some will step back, but all of us still share the ring. Train your hearts, because the next punch is empathy, or it's nothing at all." The applause began as scattered raindrops grew to a summer downpour, then rose into something like church. Frost attempted a closing line, but surrendered to the ovation. Hackworth removed his service cap, holding it over his chest. Allie bowed his head in reciprocal salute. The red light blinked off, yet no one moved. Crew members, audience, even the skeptical executives stood in a tableau that refused ordinary time. Outside on West 67th Street, a knot of protesters, hawks and doves previously shouting into separate bullhorns, paused to listen through the open loading dock door, where the sound spilled. Their slogans faltered, replaced by hesitant nods, a cigarette offered across ideological trench lines, the first fragile gestures of a ceasefire that would not appear in any Nielsen report. Later, much later, when the reels were replayed on midnight affiliates and radio hosts dissected every pause, commentators could not agree whether Ali had debated, preached, or simply lived his philosophy in front of the lights. But one detail no one disputed. For 90 unscripted minutes in 1970, a boxer without a boxing license and a colonel laden with decorations met on neutral ground and demonstrated that principles need not be mortal enemies of respect. Ali exited the building through a side door to avoid throngs, but a cluster of teenagers spotted him anyway. They offered scraps of paper, vinyl LP sleeves, a battered copy of The Greatest. Ali signed each, adding beneath his name the phrase he'd forged during exile. "Service is the rent we pay for our room on earth." One boy, freckles bright under the street lamp, asked whether the champ would ever fight again. Ali ruffled the kid's hair. "Son, I fight every day I breathe. Gloves are just one pair of tools." A taxi idled nearby, driver banging the roof impatiently. Before climbing in, Ali looked back at the ABC marquee where his own image flickered beside Frost's. Two silhouettes locked in dialogue. He tipped an imaginary hat toward it. Somewhere behind glass, Silverman was probably calculating ad revenue. Hackworth was likely staring at campaign ribbons, hearing jungle insects. Frost perhaps rereading his note cards, wondering how many punches a question mark could throw. The cab pulled away. Bondini leaned forward from the front seat, grinning into the rear view. "Champ, you danced sweet tonight. Feet never touched canvas." Ali settled against the seat back, muscles finally releasing. "That wasn't dancing, Bondini. That was shadow boxing with a nation's doubt. Shadows don't bruise, but they sure sap your legs." He closed his eyes, imagining the gym in Miami, where bags would swing like pendulums awaiting his return. The road ahead, the Supreme Court, the gyms, the arenas humming with unspent electricity, stretched out like a 12-round distance he knew by heart. As the taxi merged onto 9th Avenue, snow flurries began to fall, kissing the windshield before vanishing. A city of 8 million exhaled small clouds into the cold. And somewhere in those drifting crystals, a simple truth crystallized. Sometimes the hardest-hit man in the ring is the one who refuses to throw the first punch, yet keeps standing anyway.